So we have seen what homeostasis is. We now know. We now know the need. Okay. We now know what must be maintained constant. We know. We have some basic understanding as far as homeostasis is concerned. So let's now talk about the different mechanisms. And I was amazed with this. You can have a look. There's a beam balance. There is a beam balance, like how you can see. If something raises above normal levels, then the sensor detects, and then after the sensor detecting, then there must be some homeostatic center, the center which is responsible for that, and then the center responds and you restore back. So those are that's the mechanism. We are going to have a look. So homeostasis is a self-adjusting mechanism. It's a self-regulatory mechanism. Doesn't need any external forces. You don't need to tell your body that, man, I'm feeling cold. I think we should do so. No, you don't need to do that. You don't need to tell your body that I'm feeling weak, I'm feeling hungry. You should break down some glucose and produce energy. No. But the body regulates all those processes. The body adjusts different physiological processes to suit, to bring about the response that is appropriate to a given condition. Now, any deviation from the norm, like what I told you, there must be a normal level, there must be a norm, a point of reference, and then there must be a deviation, and that deviation becomes a stimulus. And by the way, the deviation can either be an increase or a decrease. Okay? And that deviation now is the one which induces, okay? It induces certain physiological responses that will restore back the normal level. Okay? So that is, and like I said, the deviation can be in form of a deficiency or an excess. Then you must have a normal level or a set point or a reference point where you're going to relate either high or decrease. And that normal level, by the way, is the optimum. It's the level where your body does everything best. Okay? So therefore, any deviation from the norm, then certain physiological responses are triggered, which will bring back to the normal. If it's either high, then you reduce. If it's low, then you increase. And in doing that, in so doing, then you shall be regulating. Okay? You shall be maintaining your constant body temperature, constant internal environment. So now you think of what is an efficient homeostatic system. Which features should it possess? What should you have? What are the characteristics of an efficient homeostatic system? Can you think of them? Can you write some down? Can you drop some? Let's drop some answers. What do you think are components of a good homeostatic mechanism? So okay, yeah. Thanks Jordan for the response. Now, For the components, what constitutes a homeostatic mechanism? Number one, you should have receptors that will detect a change. And by the number one should even be a stimulus. There must be a change. Okay? There must be a change. There must be a stimulus. And then that stimulus is the one that can now be detected or received. Okay? And by the way, let me give you this. If we are studying and the question says, or if you are in a paper or in, and the question says describe how this is regulated, this is what I'm supposed to see. I must see, and this is what I'll be marking. I must see a stimulus, and the stimulus is an increase or a decrease. Then from the stimulus, I must see your receptors. I must see receptors because there must be something to receive that particular stimulus. Then away from the stimulus, after you have received, you've detected, then I must see you firing impulses from the stimulus to the control center. Then I must see the control center, and then from the control center, I must see you firing impulses from the control center to the effectors. And then I must see effectors that will bring about the change in behavior to an organism. So that's exactly what I want to see in any question. And when I'm marking, that's what I'll be looking for. Does somebody have a stimulus? Yes, it's there. Does somebody has a control center or coordinating center? Yes, it's there. Do you have the effectors? Those which will bring about the response? Yes. And then the system of nerves that will coordinate these entire organs? Yes. Then if you can do that, then you'll be kawa, you'll be good to go. You'll be good to talk about the feedback mechanisms. And these feedback mechanisms are none other than the negative and the positive. By the way, all the body responds by either negative feedback or positive feedback. And those are our feedback mechanisms that we shall base on. So it is either negative or positive. Now they do confuse that some students, they do confuse these words. But with network, you are decreasing. With positive, you are increasing. You are doing more away from the norm. So let's see. Now with negative feedback, if a disturbance happens, okay, you disturb away from the norm or you deviate away from the norm, then the body is able to detect that there is a deviation from the norm. Now after the body detecting, it is going to respond by negative feedback by doing certain things that will restore back the normal levels from a deviation. In other words, there is a norm and then there is an increase beyond norm or a decrease beyond norm. Now what the body does, if the body wants to respond by negative feedback, then it will find ways of bringing back this level to the normal level. But if it's positive feedback, then if there is a disturbance, Do we have positive feedback? It must be down. Yes. Now with positive feedback, if there is a disturbance, if there is a deviation below the norm or above the norm, then the body brings about different responses, different physiological responses that will increase the disturbance more and more and more from the norm. So you have this is the norm. If this is our norm, you can see there is a disturbance, okay, above the norm. Now by positive feedback, the body responds by bringing certain physiological changes that will continue disturbing more and more and more. So that is positive, that is negative feedback. And actually there are these feedback mechanisms that are so important as far as homeostasis is concerned. Not so, guys? Yes. So these feedback mechanisms, they are the ones which bring about the responses. So let's see. Let us see. You can think of some examples by them. Think of some examples where you have negative feedback and some examples where you have positive feedback. Let's think about some. So now with
I think the negative feedback
yes.
is where you're sweating and
Mhm.
the body has to call you back.
And the body cools down, okay, and you restore back the normal temperature. Then somebody to give us an example of
The,
positive feedback. Positive feedback. Now with positive feedback, you can also give many examples, but the most common one, the suckling of the kid. When the kid is suckling the mother's breast, okay, when the kid is suckling the mother's breast, there is positive feedback, okay, there is positive feedback. That suckling produces more oxytocin, and oxytocin causes ejection of milk, but more suckling leads to more production of oxytocin, and more oxytocin leads to more production, sorry, more ejection of milk. During birth, the same applies there. Remember we talked about oxytocin hormone in coordination. So also even during birth, the same thing happens. Oxytocin leads to contraction of stomach walls, but also stomach walls leads to production of oxytocin hormone. So stomach walls contract, more oxytocin is produced, more oxytocin produced causes more contraction, and more contraction causes more oxytocin, and more oxytocin causes more contraction. In other words, you deviate more away from the norm. Okay? You deviate more from the norm, which brings about an amplified effect. Even during copulation, there is also some positive feedback mechanism, but I won't talk about that. I won't talk about that. We shall talk about it in reproduction, not here. So that is positive feedback. But with negative feedback, there is deviation from the norm, body gives a response or certain physiological responses which will restore back the normal levels. Actually, you are not taking it down, but you are restoring back the normal levels. And it's as cool as this. And actually, this is the one that is more prominent as far as regulation is concerned. We shall see regulation, water, you can glucose, calcium ions, temperature, and stuff like that. All those ones, they are negative feedback mechanisms. So